12.4 delta high leg voltage, the NEC requirement. See, because of this issue of the voltage, the code's like, look, 110.15. The high leg conductor must be identified by an orange color or other effective means at each point in the system where the connection is made and the neutral conductor is present. So only where the neutral is present do you have to identify the high leg. So if you get a delta secondary of 120, 240 with a high leg of 208, you do not have to identify the high leg conductors when they're terminating in a panel board into the high leg where it's terminating in there's no neutral, because there's no problem, right? You can drop all the breakers anywhere you want to. There's no neutral connection. So the hazard is that when there's a neutral connection. So you have to identify it by orange or other effective means. The other rule comes in here is that's in 408.3E1, the high leg is required to terminate to the B phase on a 4-wire delta connected system. Years ago, it was the C phase. So be careful that you might go to some application, like Brian, like, they put this sucker in the wrong phase. Well, I'm here. Let me clean up the panel board, fix it all up. I'll move that baby from the B phase, from the C phase, get it to the B, because you're pulling out the guts in that panel. You're going to replace that thing up. You're going to clean it all up. And all of a sudden, you don't realize there's a reason that it was, and that was the system at that time, back in the 70s. Brian.
One of the streamers made a comment that maybe you want to address about the utility bringing in the high leg on C phase and then the code being B phase, and that is something that's important to remember.
Let's take a look at this slide right now. So what they're bringing up is this. The utilities require the high leg to be on the C phase. That's in the meters. We are required to have the high leg on the B phase in panel boards. There is no requirement to have the high leg on the B phase in a disconnect. So just a thought. Put the high leg on the C phase of utility, put the high leg on the B phase at the panel board, and put the high leg on the A phase in the disconnect, so therefore it's balanced. What do you think about that, Mark? Because you seem to be the guy that I don't like that. I don't like that. Do you follow what I'm saying? The code says the high leg is on the B phase of panel boards. Nothing to do with meter enclosures, nothing to do with disconnecting means. We have to make sure that we are aware when we read the code what it applies to. So like you said, Brian, that was brought with one of the streamers, that so you got to be aware. Is it a good practice? Probably to put it on the B phase and the disconnect? Sure. Why not? Brian.
Just one other thing while we're talking about 120, 240, and I think Eric briefly tried to cover it, but if you run into one of these, you have to be very, very careful on a high leg delta transformer that you don't have a huge number of 120 volt loads. They typically, and it fluctuates between the transformers, but the older ones were about a 5% loading on any single leg of 120 volt line to neutral loads. Don actually sent a comment in a little while ago, said the old ones were 5%, the new ones are up to 30%, some of them, but no matter the case, it's not really a transformer that you can load up a huge amount. We actually had issues with utilities.
Hold on. Let me show the graphic to get the guys to understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
And then let's get into it. All right. If we had a panel schedule and I gave you some loads and I gave you lighting loads, you would be connecting the lighting loads between which lines? Line 1 and neutral, right? In your panel schedule. Line 3 and neutral.
Right.
I got another lighting load. Line 1 and neutral. Line 3 and neutral. Line 1, I would only connect my lighting loads between line 1 and neutral and line 3. Is that right?
Correct.
That means that I keep loading up this transformer C. I get a 3-phase load. Line 1, line 2. Okay, well, then that's going to give me some loads. 1/3 on C, 1/3 on A, 1/3 on B. I got line-to-line loads. Okay, line 1, line 3, that goes on phase A. I got some line 3 and line 2, it goes on phase B. When you get a delta secondary, you have to take these loads and you have to balance them and you have to show this configuration because your neutral connected loads can only be on C. Now, years ago, you could get 3 separate transformers. And this could end up being, let's say, 15 kVA. This could be 15 kVA, and this could be 50 kVA. Right. But if you're going to get a 3-phase transformer that's already constructed as an assembly, well, then you're going to have your line, the neutral loads, limited simply because they can only be installed on one phase. And like you're saying, years ago it was 5%. Okay, now they're saying, okay, well, they've done something to allow it to be 30%. And I hate to interrupt you, but I wanted to get to people to where we're at. Okay, now what were you saying?
Well, and all I was going to say is this. It really has to do with the maximum amount of line to neutral load, because we've actually had discussions with utilities where they're like, hey, you have to do a transformer upgrade. We turn in a load data sheet, because what they're looking at is not necessarily are your loads balanced, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, well, we don't want that balance, the panel I'm in good shape. Well, that's true until you have a lot of loads that can come on a single phase at one time or single leg at one time and cause an imbalance, and then the transformer overheats.
Yep. And so this really, a lot of our discussion really has to do with the utility, because you're probably not buying your transformers. Utility will be installing 3 transformers up there, and you'll see when you have a Delta system, you'll see 2 small transformers, and all of a sudden you see a large transformer, because it didn't a C phase, because they have a lot more line to neutral loads than just simply the other single phase transformers by themselves. Anything else on this part, Eric?
Yeah, real quick. If that's a 30 kVA transformer, really easy way of looking at it. A is 10 kVA, B is 10 kVA, C is 10 kVA. So by definition, you can only have 10 kVA worth of the 120 volt loads.
But the problem
Total,
is,
right.
if you
That's
have
a
line-to-line loads, when you do that panel schedule,
Right.
you better not put any line-to-line loads between line 1 and line 3.
Well, exactly.
Because you better make sure you put them on line 1, line 1, line 2, and line 3. And then when you have a 3-phase load, it does what? It distributes among all the lines. So you'd have to then balance, 3-phase loads on all the lines, line to line. Okay, so you have to put in your panel schedule, and we have to tell you which breakers go on which positions in that panel. Because you just can't drop in breakers and start putting in loads like you would on a Delta Y transformer or Delta Y configuration. So this is something that you really have to be aware of. The engineer has to have a panel schedule, and you have to follow that exact panel schedule. Because if you drop breakers that makes, this is A to B, B to C, put this inside here, man, you could end up smoking the transformer, because transformer C is now carrying 50 kW when it was designed to carry.
And that's what happens when you do renovations or a new tenant moves in and the power company wasn't involved in any of the building plans because the service was existing. So this is a really good thing to be aware of.
Okay. All right. I think we've done a pretty good job of bringing in the cons, but what's the pros? You have 240 volt. Here, so where would you use a Delta high leg system? Well, I have a warehouse. Almost all the loads are going to be 3-phase, and I have a little bit of a lighting loads that's in the building, especially today with the LED lighting, what have you inside there. And I balance the panel properly. I have my panel directory. The transformer is properly sized. And you get a higher voltage, lower current, smaller service size. So it's a design. You just got to know what you're doing. And we talk about the hazards for the electricians and the contractor. Brian.
Well, in the commercial industries that we worked in that dealt with heating, they really actually did not want 208 volts to any of their equipment that had resistive heaters in them, because then it was a huge problem for them. It took longer for the equipment to heat up and get to temperature and these types of things.
Well, we talked about that when we were dealing with, forgot what unit back, I think it was voltage drop. We talked about that when something is rated a given voltage and it's a resistive heater, and heat is a function of E squared over P. No, let's see, heat is I squared over R, but no, the voltage, it's the square of the voltage that's going to affect the amount of heat that you're going to get. So if you drop it from a 230 volt rated piece of equipment and you bring it down to 208, well, then you're never going to get the heating effect that you need of that equipment. So you're saying, hey, listen, I have equipment that's rated 230 volt heating equipment. I need 230. There are applications. I think, Eric, didn't you guys say something that sometimes you get equipment from European standards? Okay, well, I need 230 in there. Well, then we got to get with the utility. We need to make, or we have to do a transformer. We got to do. This is not that common, but see, I'm trying to teach you guys. And there's a group of students right now. Brett out the. You guys third year class?
Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin. I want to say hi to you students out there. Let me tell you something. You're in third year class. Ohm's law, series circuits, parallel circuits, multi-wire branch circuits, all the code rules, the national code calculations. Let me tell you something, guys. You learn your stuff, you're going to be a rock star, and you're going to make a lot of money. We need leaders. This is what the stuff that we're talking about. This is more than just the exam. It's to be able to go in there and say, hey, listen, I got my equipment. It's not operating properly. and then you read your label. Oh, it's 230. You're at a 120, 208. Okay, well, there's your problem. That equipment is not going to give you the performance. Dennis, and we'll move on.
I just want to get something clarified or get it clarified. You had made the statement that we don't have to mark it on disconnects.
I didn't
high
say
leg?
that. I didn't say that. Take
Okay.
it back.
He just said we could put it.
I said you can put it on phase A, or put it on phase B, or phase C.
But the orange color or
Let's go back. Let's
or
go back to the orange
identifying
color.
mark.
Whoa. Let's go back to the orange color. The orange color
Okay.
is always required anytime there's a neutral present.
Correct.
Okay, got
or,
that.
Or other effective means.
Or other effective means. And then the next rule is 408.3E1 says that it has to be on the B face of a panel board.
Okay.
Then I got the one about utilities. Utilities will require to be on the C face. And then I said there is no rule where you locate the high leg in disconnecting means, because that rule on high leg location B only applies to 408, which was switchboards and panel boards, and the rules on disconnecting means is 404, which is switches. And there's nothing in switches about the high leg location. Did not say about identification or color.
I
Brian?
just got a note in from another instructor, and he just said it would be helpful for us if you clarify when you're talking about the high leg, is it the utility or inside the building? And the answer is usually the utility, but it could be inside the building.
No,
It
no,
could
no.
be a
What is
transformer.
what is the question?
Where's the high leg coming from? From the utility or from inside the building? And it could be either.
Here's where it's coming from. It's coming from the power supply. If you're getting power from the utility and it's a 120 208, well, then your high leg is go to the service disconnect right here. Go to that meter right there. Guess what? From that meter can, it's going to be 208. But this, if it was black, red, blue, and you put a transformer and you're trying to now get from a 208 volt system, right? We're going from 120 to 208. I need to get 240 volt rated equipment, and I needed a grounded point on the secondary side. Well, then I would go from 208 primary, and I would then go to the secondary, because the transformer primary could be lower, right? Lower voltage could be then to the higher voltage going out in that particular case there. Well, then I'd have a high leg on the output. So the high leg is originating from the power supply. It isn't like, where's it coming from? It's coming from the last secondary. That's when you have a 120, 240 volt, three-phase high leg, because you have 120. It's grounded. It's three-phase. 120, 240, you can only have a high leg, three-phase. If it's 120, 240, and if it doesn't have a high leg, then it's a single phase. 120, 240, single phase, just two transformers. All right? All right, students, if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys jump in and give us, and that helps for the instructors to give us feedback. By the way, if you have a high leg, we have to have a label. We have to identify on that panel board or switch gear that the midpoint of one phase is grounded and must be field marked with the following: caution. B phase has 208 volts of ground. What does the rule actually say? 408.3F. 408.3. Oh, wow, look at that. F. Oh, okay, right there. Well, F is, look at that. F is what? I'm going to highlight that. I didn't even know there was an F section, at least not in this context, having to do with panel board identifications. Number 1 is what? High leg. 2 is ungrounded systems. 3 is high impedance grounded systems. 4 is ungrounded systems. 5 is resistive grounded systems. That's kind of cool. All those labels. All right, let's go over to high leg, though. High leg identification, caution. Phase blank has blank volts to ground. Wait a minute. A switchboard, switchgear, or panel board containing, Brian, we have to submit a public input. It has to say phase B. No, Boyd?
Well, I'm thinking, what if you've got an existing building that's already got a system in at another phase, and you're just needing to mark it?
Like I said, we would not want to make a public input to say that phase B is 208 volts to ground, because it might not be phase B, and it might not be 208 volts to ground. Right? We saw that 192, 191, we saw the 199. It had already been, there was an existing building. It was already a phase C. Yeah. So wherever the phase is going to be, that is going to be the high leg, we need to identify that and identify the voltage to ground. All right, so in our example here, since it's a brand new installation, It is a 12240 volt nominal system voltages. We are going to be coming off of phase B, so this label will be appropriate for a new installation.